What's up, YouTube? Tenchi Arizonia, the angry Dracolope of the Jackalope crew here. And tonight I have my wood stove burning. You can probably see the flames at the bottom of the camera frame. And tonight I have a little bit of a story time for you that kind of relates to this atmosphere I have going on, because it's a little bit of a camping story. And I will be going over to one side periodically to put some more fuel in the fire. In fact, I'll do that now before I get started. So hopefully I don't have to add as much throughout the video. I have got quite a bit of fuel here, so hopefully it will last. Anyway, as I said, this is a camping related story, and it actually relates to when I used to go camping with a friend of mine back when I was around 15 or 16 up to a area that borders Wiltshire and Dorset. The Shaftesbury area borders Dorset, where I live, and the neighbouring county to the north, Wiltshire. And the first time we went up there, his father drove us up there in his old truck. I actually used to work for his father as well after I left school. Anyway, back to the topic at hand, the story time. Well, me and my friend went camping up to this area in Shaftesbury. While we were there, we'd done some fishing, a little bit of hunting, and generally just had a good weekend relaxing. Now, that being said, this was in the middle of winter, and I really was not prepared for how cold it was going to get. So I didn't take a jacket or anything with me. And that first night camping, both me and the friend I was with were absolutely fucking freezing, despite being in a two-person tent that was an all-weather tent. But I got it second hand. So yeah, here we are camping up in Shaftesbury, actually on a piece of land that his godmother owned, a small farm she owned in point of fact. And after the first night we decided to move our camp further down her piece of land to where she had an old barn. Now, the barn was never used by her, it was just an old deserted barn that was on her piece of farmland. So we, after the first night, moved our camp set up to just behind the barn to use it as a windbreak. And that's kind of where this story starts. The second night we were camping, because the second night we were camping we had a few odd experiences, sounds that we couldn't explain, shadows on the side of the barn, and that was really weird because bear in mind, this is the middle of the countryside, there's absolutely no street lights or anything like that. We were on the side of the barn that was opposite from the farmhouse, so there was no light even from the farmhouse. Yet, about halfway through the night we saw this huge shadow on the side of the barn. Neither of us knew what it was, so we just kind of wrote it off, to be honest. And the next day we were due to go hunting, and bear in mind we were hunting on private land using air rifles, hunting for rabbits, pigeon, that sort of thing. So small game. And got about halfway through our couple of hours hunting in the morning, because we'd done it early in the morning, again late in the evening. Just top up the fuel. I forgot how much this stove actually uses. Hopefully it doesn't go out, because yeah, I kind of need the light. Ah, there we go. Anyway, from our little morning hunt, which lasted about 2.5, 3 hours maybe, like I said, a couple of hours, we hunted some rabbits, as we usually did, and we came across paw prints. And I know what you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a similar story to the last one. No, not at all. Because these paw prints were apparently, they seemed to be feline paw prints. Something kind of unusual, because as I've said in the past, we do not have big cats in the UK. And yet I know I'm having to bend down here a lot to keep the fire fuel. So we saw these paw prints that appear to be from a cat, but there's no big cats in the UK apparently. So after our hunt, we went back to the farmhouse for our breakfast, because we, at that time, had let our campfire go out and we didn't have any more firewood. We were going to have to go out and get more that day. So we went back into the farmhouse to have our breakfast, and I asked my friend's godmother if she'd ever heard of large cats in the area. And she said there was a legend of a cat in the area, something that had been talked about in hushed whispers in bars. We're talking country pubs here, so in the local bar. Down at the other farms there had been reports of livestock being killed, sheep, pigs, goats, that sort of thing. And all the stories say it appeared to be cats because the bodies were covered in scratches and claw marks. And people called it the legend of the Shaftesbury panther. Now, I don't know how true this legend is, but apparently how it goes is there used to be a wealthy individual in the area who had a bit of a menagerie, think a private zoo. And in his menagerie he had a pair of panthers. Well, one winter there was apparently a fierce storm, and during this storm the enclosure that panthers were kept in blew down, basically collapsed, and the panthers escaped. Now, as she was telling this story, I asked her, well, when according to the legend did this happen? And from what she told me, it occurred in the 1800s on a piece of land that is now actually bogland. Modern day it's actually just a bog, but there are remnants of a large building there, say a manor house. So after hearing this story, me and my friend went about gathering our firewood for the campfire that night. And then as the evening came on, as we planned, we went out on the hunt again for some more rabbits. Now, bear in mind, excuse me for going off to one side so often, at the time we were hunting for a local farmer as a form of pest control. So we had basically free rein to take as many rabbits as we could catch or shoot, basically. So after we finished our hunt, we had a rabbit, we skinned it, dressed it out in the field, took it back home, put it on our campfire for our late night meal. And well, while it was cooking, me and the friend I was camping with, and I know I'm not naming him here, but he doesn't like talking about this kind of thing. He didn't at the time, and I don't know where he is these days, to be honest with you. So while we're cooking the rabbit for our late night meal, we talk about the story that his godmother told us, and about how unusual it seemed. And while we were talking about it, basically recapping the points of the story to each other, we heard what seemed like a cat growl. Now, if you've ever heard a cat when it's angry, that kind of growl, but deeper, louder, and well, a lot more creepy. So we heard that growl. We thought nothing of it at the time because it was still a little bit light, kind of like it is now with the sun just setting, but you can't tell that through this camera, I'm sorry to say, which is why I've got the campfire, camp stove. So, we decided that night, after we heard this growl, that we were going to take watches. One of us would sleep, the other would watch over the campsite. Because this barn was quite far from the farmhouse and we were on the side away from the farmhouse, and there was a big hedge between where the barn was and the other end of the plot of land that my friend's godmother owned, and where the gate was. The gate was right down the other end, so we actually had to go down the other end, out the gate, round and up the other side of the hedge to get back to the farmhouse. Probably should have mentioned that before. Anyway, he took first watch, and while he was doing his first watch, he said he heard no sounds whatsoever. And this was from around 8 or 9 PM till around 1 AM. At 1 AM, I got up and took my watch. My watch was from 1 AM to 5 AM. Because at 6 AM that morning was when we started our morning batch of hunts for the local farmer who was letting us do pest control in his land. Well, during my watch, I again heard the telltale growls of a large animal. What we believe from the story was a large cat, a panther if you will. Although I don't think it's a live panther at this point, I think it's more of a ghost panther, because as soon as I heard the growl, I looked around at the barn and there was a big shadow against the side of the barn in the shape of a panther. But I looked around, all around our campsite area. Now, I had pretty good night vision at the time. Not to say like I had a pair of nogs or anything, couldn't afford anything like that. No, I just had pretty good vision at night because I've been so used to being out at night, camping with him. And even before I went camping with him, the school I went to used to take trips in the evening to places like the New Forest. So I was pretty used to it at this point. And I saw nothing, just this shadow against the barn wall. And I can tell you guys, 100% honestly here, there was not even any moon out that night. It was an overcast night. There was no ambient light that could have cast such a large shadow, such a recognisable shadow. The campfire at that point was really low, almost embers, so that wasn't casting much ambient light around us. And once my friend got up after I'd done my watch, he got up at 5 o'clock, I told him what I'd heard and saw, and he suggested we move the campsite. I said, no, we're not going to move the campsite, we're going to keep it here, you stay in the farmhouse tonight, I'm going to keep a watch on the camp. So that night, he stayed in his godmother's farmhouse, me being the more adventurous of the two. I stayed at the campsite, again heard telltale growls of a large feline. Excuse me, gotta grab a piece of wood. Again heard the large telltale growls of a feline, and again saw the shadow. Now, I started taking notes at this point, and bear in mind I was only around 15 or 16 at the time, but I started taking notes of the times it appeared. And the times it appeared were always consistent, between 2 and 3 AM. The growls persisted from about midnight till 1:30, then you had about half an hour of silence, and then the shadow appeared on the barn wall at around 2 or 3 in the morning. This proceeded for the entire 2 weeks we were there. Lovely camping trip, by the way, aside from this mystery. And as I said, this proceeded for the entire time period we were there. Would you look at that, I've used up almost my entire stock the firewood, just talking about this. And quite honestly, guys, do I believe it was a panther such as the legends? Yes, but not a living panther. I think it was something undead, for lack of a better term. However, that did not stop me going back and camping there again. In fact, it only strengthened my resolve to continue going to that spot to camp. And even when I lost contact with my friend I used to go camping with, I went there a few more times, invited up by his godmother, because we kept in touch for a while. And every time, similar story. Growls of a large cat, shadows of a large cat on the barn wall. Excuse me, I'm just prodding a bit of wood. There we go. There we go, properly in. As I said, shadows of a large cat on the barn wall. Now, the last time I went up there was, I think, 2002, January 2002. And that was actually an interesting camp trip. And it was, as I said, it was the last time I went up there, because after that, the friend's godmother moved away to a different area. But while I was up there, I asked her why she decided to move, and she told me the year before I went up there, she'd got some livestock, some sheep and a couple of goats. 3 days and 3 nights after she brought them onto her land, she heard growls of a large animal. She saw a shadow on the barn, and most eerie thing of all, the shadow had red eyes. It was not a normal shadow. Now, worrying about her investment of livestock, she ran out to the barn, and because of the amount of land she had, she did have a shotgun. She ran out to the barn with a shotgun. Excuse my stutter in there. As I said, she ran out to the barn. Damn, can't English today. Ran out to the barn with her shotgun. When she rounded the corner to the area where me and my friend used to camp, she saw her livestock entirely ripped to shreds. And honestly, guys, that is what made her move. While I was camped there, I put a few rabbits in a small fenced off area near the barn, just so I could confirm her story. And around 1 o'clock that night, the growls of a large animal. 3 o'clock, a shadow with red eyes on the barn. And the rabbits squealing. When I went round the barn, all the rabbits were torn apart, and at the perimeter of the pen, well, what I made, paw prints, humongous paw prints. And I mean like bigger than a panther. I mean like, if you've ever seen diagrams of a tiger's paw print, we're talking that kind of size. But there was no trace of any cat. And my camp stove has gone out now, so I'll finish this story up because I have no more fuel. I apparently didn't cut enough. So as I said, paw prints, rabbits ripped apart. I immediately packed up my campsite, and as soon as the buses started the following morning, I left, got the bus back home. Now the bus home took about an hour and a half, and I was talking to someone on the bus about it, and they said yes, there is a phantom cat, their words, phantom cat in Shaftesbury, and certain areas of that place are not safe, namely the outlying countryside, and they advised never returning. Needless to say, I haven't been back since. not because I don't want to, but because honestly I have no contacts in that area anymore, so I cannot camp in that area. Anyway, let me know what you think of this story, which will be called The Phantom Cat of Shaftesbury. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. Anyway, that's all for now. If you like it, please subscribe, comment and share. Remember, don't get eaten, because there are things that go bump in the night.
I'm the Dracolope, bitch.